So
Excellent,
she's
Ms.
joined
Moore.
us.
Yes, the meal and the meeting's recording.
Okay, excellent. All right, let's kick it off. Hi, I'm Patty Richards, the chair of the Vermont Community Broadband Board, and I call the meeting of October 18th, 2024 to order, and it is 12:04. First item on our agenda is a roll call of board members and staff. I'll do the board. We have in attendance Brian Otley, Laura Sibilia, Dan Nelson, and welcome Sarah Hoffman as our new board member. And Sarah, we're going to do introductions of you in a few minutes after we approve agenda and do a couple of administrative things. So welcome early on. First on or let's do staff roll call. Christine, can you run down that?
Staff. We have Tony Clitheroe, Heron Herzog, Christina Sweet, Rob Fish, and from the PSD supporting us is JB Ledoux and Stephanie Tuxell.
Excellent. Hello, everybody. First on our agenda is to approve the agenda. Are there any changes, or let me make a motion to approve the agenda and then we'll ask for discussion. I move that we approve the agenda as provided. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Brian. Any discussion? Any
Yeah, I'd
changes
like
to
to
the agenda?
recommend one change. We don't have any new staff to report. There's been a bit of a delay in getting this person hired, so we can delete number 6.
Okay. Number 6 we'll skip over. Are there any other changes? Laura, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
To cooperate, and so on my phone, just double checking. There is a memo in our packet that I do not see on our agenda that I would like to make sure we discuss.
Okay, what memo is that?
What is the November 13th, 2024 memo from Tony to you?
Okay. I am fine to bring that up as an agenda item to discuss. We'll move that to. Let's move that to item right after item 17. So that will be item 17.1.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of the agenda with the 2 changes, which is to remove item 6, introduction of new staff, and add item 17.1, which is a discussion of memo from Tony to Patty Richards dated 11/13, 2024. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes carry 5-0. Okay, next on our agenda is approval of board meeting minutes of October 14th, 2024. I'm going to make a motion so that we can discuss. I'll make a motion to approve those minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Brian. Discussion of the minutes. Get there. I had one item, which is on page 3. I believe it's page 3 of the PDF packet, item 5. There's some wording that's missing toward the end of the item. It reads, with no other discussion, the chair made a motion to approve Maple Broadband, parentheses, period. And it says seconded to use up to 500,000 remaining grant funds. And that should be seconded by somebody. So we can get that correction added. I think it was Laura Sibilia that seconded that item. We can make those corrections. That was the only thing that I saw in the minutes that needed correction.
We'll take care of that, Patty.
Thank you, Tony. Is there anything else in the minutes? Okay, hearing none. And obviously, Sarah, you'll abstain since you were not at the meeting.
I will abstain. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. All right, for all of us that were at the meeting, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And those abstentions? Sarah, you'll abstain?
Oh, I'm sorry, I will abstain.
Okay, that's approved 4-0 with one abstention, Sarah Hoffman. Okay.
I'm not quite sure
That
how to
is-
help with that.
That is item 2 in our agenda, which is approval of minutes. So let's move now to public comment. Christine, will you run public comment for us?
Yes, I will. So at this point in the agenda, if you would like to say something, please raise your hand and you'll be given 3 minutes to speak. And I'll call on you at the order as you raise your hand. Going once? Going twice? Okay, I don't think we have any public comment.
Okay, and just to remind everybody, we have a closing public comment section to allow another opportunity. If you missed something that you wanted to speak on, you also can make a public comment at the end of the meeting. Okay, so let's move now to item 4, which is introduction of our new board member, Sarah Hoffman. And Sarah, I am thrilled to have you join. Welcome to the board, and would love you to say hello to the group and just give us a few minutes of hello from your perspective.
Thanks so much, Patty, and thank all of you. I am thrilled to be joining this board and quite honored, frankly. I want to thank the speaker for appointing me. But this is actually something that is near and dear to my heart. I spent a lot of years at the department and at the PUC doing telecom and broadband issues, as well as electricity. But it's good to be here. It's good to be part of this. I think this is an incredibly important endeavor to make this network for all Vermonters of all different stripes, income, whatever. I just think what we're doing is really important for so many reasons for Vermont. So thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here, as I said, and can't wait to get to work.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. And for all of us who have worked with you for so many years on the electricity side, I think you bring a wealth of information and talent to the table. And as I said, I'm just thrilled to have you join us. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on board. Okay, so let's now move to, unless any other board members want to welcome Sarah or say anything, I don't want to shut off.
We're all equally thrilled.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Laura. Excellent.
I will
Okay.
be reaching out to kind of meet with each of you to kind of get your perspectives.
That's a great idea. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, let's now move to item 5, which is board terms. Heron, do you want to tee us up?
Yes, I will. Thank you. I will share my screen. Board terms here. Now, Ginny couldn't be here today. She had jury duty, so I'm filling in for her. As we talked about earlier, I'm on cable, not fiber, so there's a little bit of a delay from my end here. Hopefully it will pull up soon.
Yep, I can see it.
Can you see it? So this
Yes.
is what happens
Yes.
when with my connection. Basically what it is we thought with the board member resignation, we would take the opportunity to point out the various board terms and appointing authority. May not be possible on my screen. Not sure if someone else might be able to share it.
You all have it in our packet, so it should be
And you
okay.
have it in your
Okay.
packet. So, well, sorry
Yeah,
about that.
Christine, as a matter of just keeping track of this, I noticed that everybody's term starts in February. So it would be great that if we can put on our calendar to have it at the November meeting, that we review every year at the November meeting, we review this list of board members and terms. So that way, if somebody is up for re-election, we have ample time to facilitate that process.
Okay, you got it.
Okay, thank you. So we'll have a standing item in November to check on board terms. We don't get surprised.
So it looks
Thank you
like we
very-
can, sorry.
And thank you very much for putting this table together, because we just are going ahead and with our business and not necessarily thinking about the board terms, and we don't want to miss one of these if somebody has to be reappointed.
Okay, this does show each member's term, including Sarah Hoffman's. And we'd like to point out that under the statute, her term is retroactive to February 1st of the year of her appointment, even though she was appointed in November. You'll notice her renewal term is February of 24 to February of 27. And I will stop sharing.
Okay. Is there anything else on this table that you want to point out, Christine?
No, I think it was well done. Thank you, Aaron, for your work on that.
Okay. Okay, hearing no other comments for the board term summary, let's now move on to, we're going to skip item 6, which is introduction of new staff. We're going to move now to item 7, which is the KPIs.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Alexi's been, suffering with some physical issues, and he's in great pain. So I will present this item. So I will share the screen. This was as the board talked in the last meeting. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. As the board discussed in the last meeting, we were presenting the KPIs that showed the performance to the grant. But the question was asked, well, how do we know how they're doing overall in terms of their business plan? So the board requested that staff go out and come back with a recommendation for how we track how the grantee is actually performing. So this is our recommendation. We go back to every grantee has submitted a business plan as part of their grant. And some of those business plans are being revised as we speak. For example, NEK Broadband is incorporating Central Vermont into their business plan. But the whole concept here is to go back to the business plan and look at, and also, in addition to reporting grant performance, we report the actual performance to the original business plan. So this is what it would look like, that we would take miles constructed, passings, and most importantly, the number of customers that are getting connected, and compare that to the business plan so that the board can monitor actual business performance. So that is our recommendation, and certainly I'm open to questions.
Okay, what do folks think about that recommendation? Any comments?
But this aligns with the KPI, kind of the little dashboard that was presented a month ago, right? Like it's all consistent, right?
It's not, what we've been reporting to you has been grant performance, not business plan performance. So this allows you to compare, and we can put it in a graphic form too. I think, first of all, I think it was an excellent discussion at the board, and I think it's important that the board understands how we're doing against the business plan. But what we've been reporting has been grant performance, not necessarily business plan performance.
Christine, can you put more flesh on the bones?
Yeah.
What that means?
Yeah, the original grant was based on a business plan that got, review from the outside expert. We all reviewed it. And that was the basis for the grant, providing enough security and comfort that they were leaving the dock with a sane approach or a sane plan. How do you view the difference between the grant performance and the business plan performance now? Is it just that the business plan is being updated regularly as reality confronts the original plan?
Yes. When we're asking, because we know that there are competitive pressures put on these CUDs, we're asking them to update their business plans, right, to continue to show. And what we're recommending, and this is we've asked 2 of the CUDs to go, and they've agreed to go back and redo their business plans. But we have an original business plan that came with the grant, but that becomes stale over time.
Right. But it's not like two different views, right? It's an evolution, right?
No, you're right. You're correct. It would be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Every CUD is going to have their own story and their own journey and their own path.
Yeah.
It begins with the original business plan, or begins with the business plan in the version that was attached to the original grant application or the approved grant application. And then, not surprisingly, that thing, was inaccurate the next day as reality starts banging against the plan, which is totally normal and totally fine. But I think what we're interested in is two things. Is one, certainly the core metrics of how they're doing performance-wise against their grant obligations and their business plan forecasts. But two, I think it's really important to understand when the business plan is updated, why it's updated, and it's not a negative thing at all. It's a learning thing. Each iteration of the business plan that is required, why was that? What was the impetus for that to be updated? What was learned in the market and on the ground? And keeping a historical track of that, so that at some point in the future, we'll be able to look back on each of the CUDs and understand their path and their story and their journey, and be able to, kind of summarize how that went in a what went well, what went less well, and what went as expected. So I don't know if the proposal is to have a set of grant-based metrics and a set of business plan metrics. To me, it's all the same. It's just understanding the evolution as the business plan changes over time based on the market forces and the reality on the ground that has caused them to revisit their original plan, which is totally normal.
Yeah. So what you'll see is a jump, and starting with this discussion, what you'll see is a change in those forecasts versus plans based on an update.
Yeah. So that makes perfect sense, as long as we're capturing what is causing them to update those forecasts, the reason behind the update, having that historical justification or reasoning, I think is important, so that we can capture that journey that they've been on and learn from it.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Yes, we're right in sync.
Okay.
Okay, let's go for Laura. Laura has a question, then Dan, then Sarah.
Yep. Christine, what is the direction that the CUDs are being given when being asked to revise their business plans? Are they being asked to provide you with information, or are you asking them to revise them in a certain manner?
Well, it's consistent. Each CUD has a pretty extensive spreadsheet that they need to change the parameters within that spreadsheet. So they're not changing their business, the elements of the business plan, because those elements remain consistent, but they're basically updating their assumptions in that business plan. So and it's not necessarily we're asking for it. It really is, because we're meeting monthly, it becomes an interactive discussion. So it's not like we're telling them to do that. It's part of our discussion of when to do that.
So I have not asked the CUDs, but if I were to ask the CUDs how they had been asked to update their plans, their business plans, what would they say by the VCBB?
I would guess they say it was a mutual discussion, and the CUD made the decision based on that discussion.
So I am interested, I guess, in some more specificity around the direction for updating, and because the comprehensive, the Universal Service Plan was for an entire geography for unserved addresses, and that is what was put forward. Certainly conditions change on the ground over time, but I really want to understand the parameters by which they are changing their business plan, and what are the assumptions that they're making and if they are making assumptions and if there are realities. And so I think it is important to update the plans, but I'm also wanting to make sure that I am very, very clear on the instruction that staff is given to the CUDs about how to modify their universal service plans. And I would not say that you have been very, very clear. And so how could, and there may be a number of reasons for that, how could we get more clear? Did we communicate to them in writing? Is this an executive session type discussion? Should I reach out to each one of the CUDs and ask them individually?
Well, let me just say, let me make it clear, we're not changing the universal service plan. The CUD, the grantees are committed to a universal service plan. It's a recognition that many of the addresses have been served by another provider, which changes the parameters in the business plan, and the CUD will need to adjust accordingly to ensure that they're sustainable. The idea being they need to continue to be able to show that they can support the operation and maintenance and debt service costs that are related to the plan. So those are the parameters that need to be redressed, just to give us, as the VCBB, the assurance that the grantee is still sustainable.
Yeah. And so I just want to remind us that our role when we were established was to support the CUD's build out of universal service plans. And I am concerned about changes to universal service plans and the discussion about sustainability, which is really important, but also we'd always talked about the notion of borrowing. And very specifically, what I'm worried about is if we have CUDs that for sustainability reasons and some sense of who's going where that aren't CUDs, that we are taking things off the map, or towns, for instance, that are incredibly vulnerable and asking their CUD to change their universal service plan and perhaps not having a good handle on those remaining addresses. That's why I'm really wanting to understand the specificity. So, Patty, this is really important to me, and I think it's actually should be important to us to understand really at the ground level what is happening here with the CUDs. And if I am the only person who believes that, I will go and speak with each CUD individually to understand. But I want to understand what the staff sees as the map. I have been brought up a number of times, a little bit of a worry about prioritizing, us maybe forgetting our original role of support for universal service through CUDs. And I just want to make sure that I am clear about what is the plan for all addresses.
So Laura, can I ask a question of you before we move on to the
Yeah.
next questioner? Just so I make sure I get and understand the issue that you're driving at. Is your concern that the CUD may update its business plan and its information we aren't privy to?
My concern is that we may have staff asking CUDs to change their business plans in ways that they may not think is best on the ground based on a staff vision and staff having a pretty significant role in the next round of funding that is coming in. So I just want to make sure I understand what direction is being given by our staff to the CUDs who we are serving. Okay.
All right, that's helpful. Christine, I think that I'm going to jump in before Dan and Sarah here on the questioning. I think what Laura is getting at is a little bit in what's in my head too, in terms of the changes to the business plan. What exactly would you be asking of the CUDs to change? And then how do you loop back around to the VCBB board so that we're informed what's changing?
And why?
And why, right, exactly. Obviously, and I would like to have some feedback from the CUDs on this request. If we're out of, if we're in left field on this and this becomes draconian and a very big lift, I want to hear back from the CUDs about this effort and what their thoughts are as well.
Yeah, so on the CUDs, we can reach out to the CUDs in all of our monthly meetings in the next month to review this. So the idea was to respond to the board's request with a recommendation, which you're seeing. We'll be
Right.
glad to go back to the CUDs. The key is those three parameters.
Christine, before you keep going, did you engage with Vikuda at all or any of the CUDs in this recommendation?
No,
Okay, so
no,
I think that's.
no, I was responding directly to the board request.
Okay, so, okay, that's helpful, but I do think it's important that we bring our partners to the table and have discussion with them about the suggestions to make sure that we're not off doing something that's going to cause them undue or adverse difficulties in their process.
Okay,
I think
hear
there's
you.
a step missing there, so at least that's in my head, and I do want to get to Dan and Sarah, and I see Brian's got his hand up, but I think we have some more discussion around this that needs to happen. All right,
Okay.
I'm gonna move next to Dan.
I just had a quick comment because I think it's going to be interesting to see how the different business models of each of the CUDs plays out. Some of them made partnerships and others have gone out and made straight up construction. And so how these business plans play out will be interesting to me. I hear what Laura's saying. I think that the goal of reaching or our goal of supporting the CUDs to reach universal services in the territories should not change at all. And if it were to change, I think we would be notified. I would expect to be notified in that regard, but really just a comment in that area.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Sarah?
I have two things. The first one is really easy. Brian, could you turn your sound up just a little bit? You sound like you're in a tunnel. Thank you. And two, I just want to make sure I'm understanding how this works. Right now, benchmarks are based on grant performance. This is talking about doing it against the business plan, but will we still have both, or is the one replacing the other?
One will replace the other. We essentially we've I'm sorry, the way I phrased it was a little confusing. We have an existing performance that we show a performance which is based on a grant, which was based on a business plan. What we're going to do is report solely performance. I shouldn't say this, but that the performance should be more reflective of the business plan is what we're going to do here. And the problem is we've been using old business plans that are out of date. So for example, I won't mention any CUDs in public session, but we have had I shouldn't say have had, it pretty much exists across the board. Because telecommunications is a competitive industry, the private providers are, picking off some of those best addresses. And in some cases, for example, where Consolidated is a provider of last resort, they're just bulk going into whole areas and replacing their copper networks. So that changes the elements of the business plan, because the business plan is based on how many paying customers you have. And there's an assumption of how that grows over time. And those paying customers is what generates the revenue. So if your paying customers go down, it endangers your original business plan. Mm-hmm. So what we're saying is, we think we should report based on a revised business plan. I don't know what that period should be. I don't think we should necessarily define a period that addresses all CUDs. It's basically when the parameters have changed significantly, we should update the business plan to reflect those parameters and report on that new business plan.
Thanks, Christine. That helped me understand it a little better.
Thank you. Okay, next is Brian, and then we'll go to Laura.
So, is my mic okay? You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, I think we're making more out of this than we need to, right? This is the KPI proposal, right? And the last iteration that Dan helped the team put together was a huge step forward in giving us, whether it was a monthly or quarterly view of progress. Christine's assertion that reporting off of the then current business plan is the most relevant metric, I agree with. That makes sense, but you don't want to lose the context of the original business case that was attached to the grant approval, as well as whatever iterations of business cases have happened and then been modified along the way to the now current business case. So, and again, these are pretty simple metrics, right? Dan did a great job kind of culling down the meaningful few metrics and presenting it in a format that was easy to understand. So I don't want to lose that, but I think it's important to always keep perspective back to the original grant-based business plan, even though we know those metrics are dated now, just for context and perspective. But then I agree, Christine, that the most interesting metrics will be the ones viewed against the current business plan iteration, right? And there's no reason we can't have all of that in one simple view, similar to what you just had up on the screen, right? And I think that's what you're attempting to do. So I think you're on the right track. But I will not be comfortable losing the original business plan context. I'll always look for that, even though it may not be a very meaningful point of discussion at any monthly meeting, okay, or quarterly meeting. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I'm assuming, so Laura, when you mentioned your concern about the universal service plan, I'm assuming universal service plans are like locked commitments, and that no business plan revision would ever compromise the commitment that's been made to the universal service provision, right? So I don't even worry about that. And that may be naive on my part. I don't worry about that because I feel like that's locked and non-negotiable, and that what staff and CUD would never come back and say, you know what, that universal service plan we committed to, we're only gonna make 75% of that, and it's in our revised business case, right? That would be, to me, that would be like head blows off the top, full stop, what's going on, halt, and we'd have to deep dive on that. So I'm assuming that's the case. Does everyone agree with that? Christina, is that something we can assume?
Yes.
Okay. So then the last thing I'm curious about is I'm under the impression most revisions to business plans are being brought to bear by the CUD themselves as they are managing and navigating the reality on the ground. And just like you said, Christine, they're understanding where some of the competitors are going that wasn't in the original business plan. And now that's a new piece of information that causes them to modify their planning because they may not need to reach those addresses, or they've already reached those addresses, or it may affect the take rate or whatever. But I'm under the impression that it is infrequent for staff to tell a CUD, you need to change your business plan for whatever reason it might be. It's more that the CUD is recommending a change to the business plan, keeping staff in the loop on that because that's reflective of the reality they're managing on the ground. And that's the more common model here. Is that true?
Yes. And I would say that I think you'll hear from the CUDs that it's a very collaborative monthly meeting. So it's not, we're part of the discussion. Yes, it will bubble up from the CUD. We're not telling them what to do, but we're discussing what we know, on the ground information. We find out information about what's happening in their area. They find out information. We compare notes. The question is it time to update the business plan? And it really is the CUD's decision.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, that's helpful. That's not what I heard in the beginning of the discussion on this, Christine, so that's very helpful. Brian, are you all set?
All set, Patty, thanks.
Okay, Laura?
Okay, so let me just make sure that I'm clear. So VCBB staff is not giving direction to the CUDs about how to modify their plans.
We are certainly an active part of the discussion. We don't, I mean, you know, it starts with the board, right? The board,
Okay.
you know,
Let me just,
we adhere to what the board wants to do. And
Yeah.
that does become a directive, right? I get directives from the
Mhm.
board that become directives for the CUD. So that's what this discussion is about.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
so but, you know, again, if we do believe that a CUD is running into an unsustainable model and we don't agree, it is my responsibility to bring that back to the board in executive session.
And provide that feedback to the CUD.
oh,
But you're not suggesting that they're changing their business case. You're bringing it back to the board.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Sorry to
statement.
interject, but yeah, it's a statement. You're not telling them what to change. You're just bringing it back to the board. That would be my expectation.
Right, yeah, we would bring back the concerns, but hopefully we never have to get to that point.
So I don't know what the level of interest is with the board, but based on just some experiences that I have and some knowledge that I have, I think it would be a good exercise for us to have a short interview, ask the CUDs to prepare and meet with each CUD and staff and understand why their plan is being revised and how so. So I think that's something that we could potentially do in under 15 minutes for each CUD. And I think it be a good exercise with our partners. I might get, they may not think it's a good idea. I certainly haven't floated it by them. And if it's not something that the board wants to undertake, I will undertake it on my own. But it seems like a good idea to just really for us to understand a little bit more about the dynamics literally on the ground. And because, so for instance, I'm aware in a town that I represent with one of my other hats on, where, you know, we have private providers who have come in and added coverage that has basically doomed the rest of the community. And these people are, you know, it's a big problem. And I think I don't understand, nor have I asked, you know, what the plan is for that situation from the CUD since I'm on the VCBB. But I do think that we should understand what our staff sees as the vision, what the CUDs see as the vision, and make sure that they are copacetic and we understand. I think a high-level overview with each of them would be helpful. We're getting the data, we're getting the numbers, we see the addresses, we have the dashboard, but you know, a meeting with the people about what is happening and with the staff, I would appreciate. That's it. I will not drag us any further on this, but hope that's something we can consider in another meeting.
Thank you, Laura. I tend to agree with you, Laura, that if there has been something substantial in a change of the business plan, like if there's minor stuff that's being changed, I don't think the board needs to know that. But if there are significant changes being made to business plans, we should at least have a summary. I don't need to go through every number or the whole thing again, but we should have a summary of what's changing. I think that should be a regular practice to the board, so we have a clue of what's changed.
But shouldn't that be part of this KPI reporting? Because it's like when the KPIs are modified or the forecasts for them
Mhm.
or something changes in them as a result of a modification of the business plan, if staff is noting that, right, they may not have come up with that. That's not an ask that staff made. Maybe the CUD, like you said, Laura, perfect example, right? A competitor came in, took out a patch that they didn't realize or hadn't planned on, and it does damage to their overall routing or planning or construction or whatever the effect is, they need to have revisions to their business plan to reflect that. And it's in that, and that's going to impact downstream forecasts and KPI progress. And it's at that moment that there should be a note taken that says the reason that we're calling down our take rate, for example, is because this competitor came in, took out this patch unplanned, and we're reacting to that.
Yeah.
And then
So,
we can
Brian,
react to that.
yeah, let me see if I can explain this a little bit differently. And I hear you. I agree with you. I understand what you are saying. I think there are places in Vermont where the situation is getting worse. And I think the board is blind to that. So
Okay.
that's what I'm asking for.
So that should be so then let's do that as a separate topic then, not burden the KPI discussion with this. I mean, ideally in a perfect world, the KPI discussion would unearth these
right.
things and we'd see them. But if we're not, since the KPI process is relatively new and we're not confident in that, I think the topic you just brought up was well worth discussing.
Yeah. And so I brought it up because Christine had talked about the revised business plans and how that would impact the KPIs. I agree with you. They are two different discussions, but I'm very worried about those addresses and those places where it may be getting worse, and what the perspective is of the CUD and the VCBB and what the plan is when we're talking about changing these business plans and talking about sustainability. So
That's a great.
and I think the board needs to know that.
Yeah, and Christine, does the issue Laura just raised, does that come out in your monthly collaborative discussions? Like, I mean, it's a great question. Are there any areas of your territory that are getting worse or are being damaged by the reality on the ground that was unforeseen at the time the grant was awarded? That's a great question.
Yes, and the answer is yes, and that's what we'll discuss that in executive session when we do the KPI report. And I just want to make it clear, we have not, Laura, we have not gone to the CUDs and blanket said, you need to change your business plans. This is all if you get to the issue that I think we're 100% in sync here. This is to get to the issue that you're describing. There are areas and there are some threats that could have major impact on business plans, and the board should be aware of that.
And Vermonters. So, and Vermonters, not just the business plans. Sorry, Christine.
Yeah.
Not sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I would suggest, if we have something specific on a CUD that becomes proprietary, let's take that up under item 8, which is the specific scorecard review. Because I would like to hear more about Laura's concern of whatever CUD she has concerns about. But that certainly, to me, rises to the KPI scorecard discussion for that CUD.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anything else on this general discussion of KPIs and benchmarks? Okay, sounds like we will have more to come. All right, let's move to item 8, which is the actual KPI monthly update on the individual CUDs. And as we know, the material that we are reviewing is case sensitive to the CUD and is considered proprietary. So I'm going to make a motion that we move into executive session pursuant to 1 VSA section 313 paragraph A6, which protects records exempt from the access to the public records law. Specifically 1 VSA section 317 C9 confidential business records or information. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Laura.
Yep.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I just want to make a public statement that you're going to see, and this board's going to see that the CUDs are in good shape. I mean, the reporting to this date, we're pretty confident about the performance to this date. What we're talking about is theoretical issues that will potentially impact these business plans moving forward. So I don't want to get the message out there that anybody's in trouble at this point.
Okay, thank you, Christine. That's helpful. Any other discussion before we vote? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of moving into executive session, please say aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. So Christine, can you, all the board members will be coming into executive session. Who from staff will be joining?
Yeah, I'd like to include everybody who's here from staff as well.
Okay. And you will.
Just going to grab my lunch.
Okay, so for Sarah's benefit, can you explain how this works so that she doesn't get lost in this transfer?
Yeah, Karen, are you prepared to discuss that, or would you like me to?
Yes, I have it all set up, so I should just hit open and everyone should automatically be pulled in, and that's how it should work.
Okay, so Sarah, sit tight. Don't do anything.
Okay,
There may be
be
a
over there.
link you have to click to join the room, but it'll show up on your screen.
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
Let us know, whoever is moving us, when we're ready to go.
I think everyone's back, just spotlighting.
Oh, I see Dan and Laura on my screen. There's Brian.
I don't see Sarah.
It's Sarah yet.
I'm here.
Okay,
Okay,
excellent.
we're good.
Okay, so we are back in public session. We have just come out of executive session, which was for item 8, the KPI scorecard. I will report that no action was taken in executive session. We just went through data relative to each CUD's KPI scorecard. All right, let's now move on to item 9, which is the budget. Christina.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Thank you. I will be presenting today, but our financial manager, JB Ledoux, is also on the line to answer any questions as we go. So we'll cover 4 items today. The first are fiscal year 2025 quarter 1 operating expenditures. Second are federal funding updates. Third, grants executed July through September, so the last quarter of 2024. And fourth, just an update on a summary update on our American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA obligations. Right, so looking at our expenditures, this is specifically expenditures reported against the FY25 operating budget that the board approved last July. And we are looking at our expenditures for the first 3 months of the fiscal year. So one thing to note here is that some of our expenditure categories, like personnel, we're going to see a fairly consistent spend across the year. So we saw 21% of our budget expended in the first quarter, which makes sense that it was a little bit under 25%, but not quite, because we are currently in the process of hiring 2 new staff members. But there are other categories, like the internal service fees categories, where our spend is going to be very inconsistent throughout the year. And that category in particular includes fees from other departments in agencies and state government. So that includes insurance fees, fees for space, IT charges for the Agency of Digital Services, and charges for human resources services from the Department of Human Resources. And so we don't really have a way of predicting when we get those invoices throughout the year. And in fact, in the last quarter, we received an invoice from the Agency of Digital Services that included a credit from a previous charge that was erroneously charged to us. So that's why you'll see under quarter 1 expenditures, it's not that we've spent we're not in the red, but we've actually spent less than $13,014 because they provided a credit for a charge that we previously should not have been, that should have a fee that should not have been assessed. So I will pause there and see if anyone has any questions about our operating expenditures so far.
All right, any questions, Christina? All right, seeing none, you want to keep going?
Great. Next, we have our federal funding updates. For American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA State Fiscal Recovery Fund, what we call SFR, we have now obligated all of the ARPA SFR funded grant agreements, which are for pre-construction and construction grants. And we have reserved $341,927 in administrative costs. And together that equals the full $150 million in ARPA SFR funds allocated to VCBB. So we have completed essentially all of the obligations that we needed to complete by the end of September 30th by getting those grant agreements out the door.
That is excellent news. Thank you for that.
Thank you. When it comes to the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA, our State Digital Equity Capacity Grant, this was a formula grant where Vermont was allocated $5.3 million. We submitted our application back in May. The NTIA has since completed budget and program review. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, is completing a final budget review, and we are expecting to be able or to receive notification of that award any day now. And that award, just as a reminder, is to implement Vermont's digital equity plan. Finally, we have our BEAD program award, and you may recall that we were previously awarded $5 million of Vermont's total BEAD allocation of $228.9 million, for which was known as our BEAD planning grant. With the approval of our initial proposal funding request, or IPFR, we received a grant amendment for the full amount of Vermont State's allocation. So now we have a grant agreement signed for the full $228.9 million. We still need to jump through a lot of hoops and submit a final proposal with all of the proposed grants to be funded under BEAD for broadband deployment, but we do have that grant agreement now for the full Vermont allocation, which is pretty exciting.
Also fabulous news. Thank you for highlighting that.
Any questions about federal funding updates? Great.
Looks like you're good. Go ahead.
And here are the grants and amendments that were executed in the last quarter. These were the SFR funded grants that we needed to have executed by September 30th. We had and the one BEAD potential subrecipient support grant to DV Fiber. So in addition to that grant, we had the broadband construction grant amendment to DV Fiber, a broadband construction grant to EC Fiber, an additional amendment to EC Fiber of $651,000, and a pre-construction grant amendment to Otter Creek of $352,000, primarily for operating costs, and finally a pre-construction grant for similar costs to Southern Vermont Communications Union District of $220,000. So those were just the grants that were obligated. In July through September, we have an additional $28.6 million in approved grants and amendments that will be executed in the current quarter. And I summarize that on the next slide as well. So just a summary on our two buckets of ARPA funds, our state fiscal recovery or SFR funds. We have fully obligated our $150 million less the $341,000 in administrative costs, which will be obligated by the end of the year. In the capital projects funds, we have obligated $60.1 million. We have an additional $28.6 million that have been approved by the board and will be obligated this quarter. And we have currently reserved $1.5 million for admin and contingency. And after you subtract all of that from 95 million, you get about 4.5 million, and those funds will be used for the recently approved long drop program.
And Christina, the 1.5 million reserve for admin costs, obviously there's no contract associated with that. So the paper trail is fine, noting the paper trail with the dollars allocated to the state being admin. Help me with the paper trail to make sure that we don't fall in limbo with that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And Tony has her hand up, so I didn't know if she wanted to address that.
I'm sure you can address it too, Christina. You can go ahead and answer.
Great. Well, yeah, so we may end up reducing that somewhat. We have until the end of 2026 to spend our CPF funds. And when we're, looking at more closely at our budget and what contingency needs we might have, we may be able to reduce that and move more of that into the long drop program.
Okay. The admin fees, as long as they're spent, there's a paper trail relative to salaries, so on and so forth, that's fine. Anything
Yes.
left over, then we have an opportunity to grant out those dollars.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And as an aside, which I think you'll see it later on the agenda, VCBB has earned over 8 million in interest on our ARPA funds in the bank account, but I'm not going to talk more about that in this presentation, and we'll save that for a later item on the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much, Christina. Are there questions of Christina and the information she's presented? All right. Seeing none, we can move on. Thank you very much. That was an excellent summary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move now to item 10, notification of ARPA interest added to VCBB special fund.
Yeah, Rob
Looks like
and
Rob
Tony will
and
take this. Rob's going to take the lead.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. As Christina mentioned, we're pleased to report that we've just received notification that we have access and the permission to spend over $8 million of additional funds. That was a result of interest from ARPA. This is a very unique and unusual situation. Normally with federal grants, almost always the interest goes to the federal government. ARPA is different, and because of the way Act 71 structured the funding going into the Community Broadband Fund, it is at our disposal, which is
Excellent.
great news. I'm going to turn it over to Tony, can talk a little more background on that and any restrictions.
Sure. I think, obviously this is wonderful news, right? $8 million that just kind of appeared out of nowhere. The money just needs to be used to further the same program purposes under Act 71 that we're here for. So it's extra money to get done what we are mandated to do by the General Assembly. And what's really cool about this money is it doesn't involve any other kind of approvals from the legislature or anything else, as long as we're not expanding any programs that would potentially require input of other state funds. We are in the all clear to further support VCBB operations and the grant work that we've done up to this point.
And I should say that we have had a few discussions and are bouncing around ideas, but we want to bring forth a more comprehensive proposal so we can take full advantage of this unique and unprecedented opportunity to have this chunk of money that could be used in many different ways towards ensuring things keep going, keep expanding, and keep getting better. But we welcome any ideas that the board may have. We'll be coming back likely in December or more likely January with a more comprehensive plan.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is fabulous news, and it's great to have to figure out what to do with it. Laura, you're up.
Yeah, it is fantastic news. And so this interest that is now available to us, what are the requirements that are attached to that? Are there any, or has it essentially been freed from the federal requirements?
It's freed from the deadline.
Have Tony answer that question,
Okay.
Rob.
Yeah, no, it is. It's free from, it just needs to be used for the same purpose as the money that the grant funds. So as long as it's furthering the ARPA program and under Act 71, it's fine. And the way that the approval that we have actually also includes furthering the BEAD program as well. But the ARPA program in particular, as long as we're sticking within that and supporting VCB operations, we don't need any legislative approval.
Great. So I appreciate that you all are working on ideas, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of them. Doing a lot of work outside of the legislature and the VCBB with federal funds and other types of funds in development. One of the it's really helpful when we can make money when it can be used more than once, and when we can make it revolve. Oftentimes you can't revolve federal funds, and if this money has been freed of its requirements, I'd like to suggest to you that I would very seriously like to see a proposal that includes some element of revolving lending that can keep this money working for a long time for Vermonters and in support of our mission.
Yeah, that is one of the things we're considering, so
Right.
And somebody mentioned deadlines. Could we chime in on that? Are there any deadlines associated with this interest that we'd have to spend it by?
There are no deadlines.
0 deadlines. That's huge. One thing I would like you to consider is if any of these funds could be used to help on affordability. I'm going to plant the seed and let you be creative on addressing that seed. Channeling my inner Holly.
Okay,
Okay, any other comments, questions, or kudos? All right, hearing none, let's now move to item 11, draft annual report outline.
yep, turn that over to Erin.
All right. Hello, everyone. I will attempt again to share my screen. Okay. Now, there's a copy of the annual report outlined in the board packet. This presentation is designed to walk you through what we plan to include in the report. These are the specific statutory requirements laying out what needs to be included in the annual report. I use these requirements to build the report outline and the table of contents. This is the basically table of contents and overall outline. You can see what's included. We'll have a little section about VCBB, Christine's executive summary, operating and financial statement, grants, contracts within 2024, a CUD update for each CUD, and then some of the things we're working on as far as next steps. This is one of the images you'll see in the executive summary that shows some of the progress we've made. It only shows data as of June of this year. Construction did continue throughout the summer, so more progress has been made after this. Some of the other highlights from the executive summary include 241 of 245 million of ARPA funding has been obligated. I've got a basic bead timeline of what's happening. 3 of the 9 CUDs have nearly completed their construction and achieved universal service. We discuss implementation of our digital equity plan, including providing training and resources to help underserved communities access and use broadband and technology effectively. And then we list the various board policies that were passed in 2024. This is a list of the grant programs and grantees from 2024. Of course, there'll be more information in the full report. Similarly, a list of the contract that we have had over the past year. For the CUD update, I've reached out to each CUD, and these are this is specifically what's required by the statute that we include from each CUD. I've heard back from several of them and will incorporate into the report. And then finally, we've got next steps. And these are some of the things that we're looking at to include digital equity bead, long drop program, and exploring bridge funding. Again, this is just an outline. We'll plan to have a complete draft of the report for you for your December meeting. Are there any questions I can answer at this point?
Thank you, Karen. That's a good overview. Is this fairly similar to the last annual report? And if not, what were the highlights of changes?
The structure is going to be almost exactly the same because, like you saw there, the statutory requirements are consistent. So I've tried to build it just off that. Of course, you know, some of the content will be different, but the structure will be almost exactly the same. So that's just kind of an overview of what's included. Yeah, and like you said, will be very similar to last year.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
I wanted to turn it over to Tony at this point if there are no more specific questions to discuss the board's draft policy on the annual report.
Yes, and I just wanted to take this opportunity just to clear up what could be confusing. And that's that the statute, Act 71, both requires the executive director to make an annual report to the board, which is under section 8084B1 capital D, and orient you to the fact that that's what Heron just did. This outline that she's presented to the board represents the executive director's annual report, which is then going to be used to finalize the board's report to the legislature, which is due by January 15th. And so you will have a draft of that report in the December packet, which will line up obviously with this outline for your approval so that it can be filed timely. And with respect to the policies itself, under item 17, we have a short little executive session that will address the status of the annual report policy and the recruitment policy. So I'll defer that until we get to that item.
Okay, excellent. Any questions on the annual report or the other reporting requirement? All right, hearing and seeing none. Let's move now to item 12 on the agenda, which is the parking lot. Thank you all for the work on the annual report. I know that's a big job, big project. Thank you all for your work on that.
And I'm back with the parking lot for Ginny. She has prepared a presentation as she usually does. So I will go ahead and share. Give you the
Ginny is at jury duty today, so.
Ginny's at jury duty. Okay, and these are the items on the agenda or in the board packet for review in today's meeting. This month, we have 2 slides with completed items. Number 97, 100, and 101 were marked complete as they were addressed in October's meeting. 98 and 99 are complete as well, and you have those documents in the board packet. Items 104 and 105, the corrections were made and the corrected approved minutes were uploaded to the website. 107 was addressed in writing the minutes of the October meeting. And number 112 is an item that Ms. Hallquist identified as an action item from a previous meeting from February and addressed it with a memorandum to the board, which was in the board packet. And any other questions you have, she asks you to reach out to her.
Okay. Appreciate that. Any questions or comments on the list of parking lot items? I really do like this format to just keep track of everything because we do generate a lot of follow-up items after our meetings. So this is very helpful. Really appreciate that. All right, I am not seeing any hands from board members. So we will close out item 12 on parking lot. Then let's move to item 13, BEAD timeline update.
I'm sorry. I point out that the BEAD timeline has not changed since the last meeting. So we have nothing really to point out on that, other than.
Yeah, and the
we've
only
agreed-
thing that we can point out in addition is that, as Christine mentioned, the BEAD timeline has remained the same. We do have our first RFA, or request for applications, office hours tomorrow at noon. And there's a Vermont Department of Labor training on labor issues on Wednesday. And then on Friday, we have our training for the scoring guide at 1 o'clock. So
Great.
it's an
That's really
exciting
helpful.
week
Point
of
that out.
training.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you for pointing that out for everybody listening, because I know there are
Yep.
many on the call.
And you can find all of that on our website.
Excellent. Okay, any questions or comments on BEAD timeline? Okay, hearing none, let's move to item 14, which is Vicuda update. Rob.
Great, thank you. First of all, welcome, Sarah. We're really glad that you're here and to have your experience on the board. And I know that the CUDs, as you get through your board member one-on-ones, I'm sure the CUDs would like to have some time to share their story with you as well. And we'd be happy to do that at one of our board meetings, or set up a special meeting, or even, I and the Vicuda team can help with some of that too. But welcome, and look forward to getting to know you. Vicuda has its annual board meeting tomorrow, and as many annual board meetings, kind of the key thing is for us to approve our budget and to reelect our officers. And so that will be happening tomorrow in our annual meeting. I would say that the discussion about the budget and planning for next year has kind of allowed us to recognize that a number of the CODs have made a lot of progress in the last year. And whereas, probably 2 years ago, we had a number of CODs who were thinking about getting started. We have several this year that are thinking about getting finished. And so, we're kind of addressing that as we think about the future of Vicuda and our budget and our planning. I think it's really actually a really good sign that we have that kind of progress. You see it in your graphs as well. One of the things for that, of course, is this final year of the SPICES grant, as currently written. That capacity that came through the Northern Borders Regional Commission to Vicuda ends in the ends of 2025. And so we have a request in to find out what our options are for a no-cost extension on that. But also we're planning kind of to think about how we use that in this last year. And in particular, a lot of renewed interest in financial support, accounting support, audit support, environmental protection support, and other things like that as shared services. And so that's a hot topic within Vicuda right now, and we're making good progress in those discussions. We've had a couple of great discussions with VCBB staff lately, kind of workshopping some of the new things like the long drop program. We appreciate the engagement and conversation on that, and look forward to where that's going. And then I guess the last one was when we met last time, we discussed that Vicuda and VCBB staff would get together and talk about legislative agenda. We had a good discussion about that as well. I think we're very much aligned in terms of some of the items that may arise, but other than a few minor things like perhaps revisiting whether the virtual meeting approach makes sense in some of the larger district areas as opposed to the convening in a single location. We have very little this year other than tracking things that we think are going to come out of other committees and other initiatives, and being responsive to them. So I think we're very much on the same page that we're tracking other items and probably don't have a lot that we're going to be introducing this year. So that's it for today, unless there are any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Rob. And I really appreciate that reach out to Sarah to meet with you, and really encourage you, Sarah, to do that. It's a great group, and rounding out the team relative to Vicuda and what they do for shared services, and meeting with the CUDs, I think it's a great opportunity. So thanks, Rob, for teeing that up.
Thank you all.
Yep. Thank you. Any questions of Rob? Okay, hearing none, let's move to item 15, public comment. Christine, will you tee that up?
Yes, it's time for public comment. Anybody has a comment, please raise your hand and you'll be given 3 minutes to speak, and I'll choose you in the order that you rose your hand. Krista, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Sarah, welcome. I'm very glad to have you on board. I also wanted to call out the work that was done on the RFA and just an appreciation for everything that's going into this process. It's a lot of work for all of us, and I know it's a lot of work for staff, so thank you for that. And I wasn't sure, Patty, if you were requesting a response now or not in terms of the questions around the KPIs and business plans and business modeling. We're probably in a more unique situation in the sense that there are multiple grants that we have now that are outside of the VCBB funding source. So understanding, really understanding what the board is looking for, and I found today's discussion helpful, but still raising additional questions. I think it's going to be the key piece. So we'll continue to work collaboratively with the staff during our monthly meetings to really try and hone in on how to get you the information you want in a way that reflects the information that we collect. We've put in a significant investment in the last quarter in preparing to have all of the different grant funding sources that are now going live, including the Reconnect grant and the Community Connect grant from USDA. So I do appreciate the questions, and we'll continue to work through for that. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. Anybody else have something to say? Okay, seeing none. I guess we can go to the next agenda item.
Okay, thank you, Krista, for that comment. Okay, let's move to item 17, which is board approval policy and outstanding policies. Tony, you want to tee this up for us in general and keep it in the public sphere until we move into executive session?
Sure. So what we have right now, Madam Chairs, we have a draft annual report policy that was drafted by Holly Groschner and is in near final form. It just needs some tweaking to address some changes that occurred, you know, in the interim, because she prepared this almost a year ago. So we have that policy in the hopper, and then we also have a recoupment policy, which was just a one-pager right now, that was drafted by staff to get the ball rolling. And so the purpose of the executive session is just for the board to hear my legal advice with respect to how we might want to proceed with addressing these policies.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I want to make sure that we stay in public session for anything that should be in public session. So we will stick to the executive session piece being legal advice only. But at some point, these policies need to get aired out and be in the public forum. So I just want to be very clear about that. We're only going to move into executive session for the legal advice issue. Anything outside of that, I want to stay in public session.
Right.
Because policies apply to the public here, apply to all the CUDs, and they should have a window into seeing what we're thinking about in entertaining. So I just want to make that real clear. Before we vote and approve on any policy, we'll have ample opportunity for feedback from the public.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to make a motion to move into executive session pursuant to 1 VSA section 313A1F, protecting confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the board. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dan. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? The ayes carry 5-0. So we will move over to executive session. Okay, and just let me know when we're all set to go and we've all transferred over. Whoever's running the transfer
I
process.
think you're all there.
Okay. All right, we are back in the public part of our Community Broadband Board meeting session. Item 17, in executive session, we discussed two policies, a recoupment of funds policy and draft annual reporting policy. The action that was taken in executive session, it's not an action, this is an update. Both of these policies are going to go through the sub-working group process that we performed on the other policies, which involves inviting CUDs in to review what we've drafted, and we'll have a stakeholder process to vet and take feedback. And once we're done with a final policy, these two policies will come back to the board for action. But we're going to go through the same steps as the prior policies in terms of vetting and review, feedback. So there will be more to come on this. Tony will lead the process. Sarah is going to thankfully take on the recoupment of funds policy, and I am going to take on Holly's work relative to the accountability and reporting policy. That was the action taken in executive session. All right, any other comments on 17? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to 17.1, which is a check-in in our board packet toward the end of the packet. Let me get there. Was a memo drafted by Tony dated November 13th to address to myself. Laura, do you want to ask a specific question or do you want an overview? And if you're speaking, Laura, you're muted. Is Laura still there?
She's there, but
I see her.
muted, no camera.
She's muted.
Christine, do you want to send her a text to see if she's still
Yeah,
available?
I was
Okay.
just about to. Yep.
I would go on to another item, but we're going to jump into our closing executive session. Just give her a second here to come back on.
Okay, I texted her.
Okay. And Tony, the point of this memo, well, let's take an opportunity just to go over this on a high level basis. I mean, we've all read it. But the point of this memo was to really discuss a change, a correction.
Yeah.
Do you want to go through the correction?
Sure. So, as I'm sure the board recalls, during the July 8th meeting, we had a significant discussion on affordability issues. And during that meeting, I provided an overview of the Vermont BEAD program and how we were going to be scoring proposals with respect to affordability. And at that time, our application to the NTIA, specifically our initial proposal, volume 2, did contain language indicating that we were going to be, we were looking to score proposals that demonstrated a commitment to reinvest revenue into increasing efficiency to ensure that rates remained affordable, and establishing a business structure that limited profit through a commitment to stable or decreasing prices. So the purpose of this really is to correct the record, because that particular language was in fact objected to by the NTIA, and we had to revise that section of our scoring. And so what's in the bold in the first page is the actual Vermont BEAD scoring criteria on the affordability metric, which as I pointed out on July 8th, and that part is still true, affordability represents 40% of the weight of the primary criteria under BEAD, So this is just an attempt to make sure that we didn't mislead anybody about what the actual BEAD program is currently requiring. Our initial proposal did go through procuring. This section was changed, and the approval on July 25th of this year contains the language that's in bold.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very helpful. Any questions? Comments? What I will do is ask Laura to follow up directly with you, Tony, on her questions. Unfortunately, you had to step away. But hearing no other questions or comments, let's move along. Let's move to item 18, which is our final board review process. And this is an opportunity for us to review the meeting and follow up on any personnel matters in a confidential setting. So I'm going to make a motion per 1 VSA. We go to executive session per 1 VSA section 313A33, authorizing a public body to hold an executive session to consider personnel matters. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Sarah. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? For the record, I'll note Laura did not vote. She's on the call, but she's away from her computer. So the vote is 4-0 with Laura not responding. But let's move over to executive session. It'll be staff. I think that's all we need for this one is staff. Tony and Christine, you're all set.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you
Thank
just
you.
want the board members, right?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Aaron will move you into executive session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because that's the last, that was the last item on the agenda, I think we can close the meeting. Thank you very much.